Let's see. No, I don't think. I think I want to do that. Good morning, Jacob. There's Lily Reed. There's Asher.
Unmute. Sit down. This is the wrong. He's right there. Jacob. This is the Sears. There's Jacob.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. You other guys, remember you have to push the unmute button. There we go. There.
Okay, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm on. One sec.
Yes. It's
Gallery.
it has no face.
Gallery view. Yeah.
There we go. All right. Oh, hi. Hi.
Oh,
I'll unmute myself for a second. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
hi.
I'm gonna grade the coloring while y'all are talking, okay? So I'll be here, sort of. Bye.
Hey, Camp, are you wearing a sling?
Yeah.
What'd you do?
Nothing actually. It's just an April Fool's joke.
Oh, okay.
It's funny.
I pulled it on Olson last night.
Put it on like 10 of us.
Yeah.
On Zoom. Our huddle group. Our huddle group Zoom.
I just see my watch.
Okay, let's see.
We didn't turn our coloring in yet.
Yeah, well, that's today's work. You can
Yeah.
get it in sometime today.
All right.
Last week's. Yeah. Mine's are not good.
I've been making hats. See?
Oh, yep.
And this one too.
Cool.
Mine.
Ah, cool. I've been making messes.
Wow.
How's that?
It looks just as messy as my room was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I've gotten all of the boxes that I can find unpacked. So that's been a job. But my floors look really, really nice. So hopefully by next week, we'll have it all back to normal.
This, like, just like showing, you know, whatever.
Ready.
So I've got,
You smell like smoke.
hello.
Howdy.
We're missing a few. So William and the girls.
And Jacob disappeared.
Yeah. Jacob vanished. Hmm. Oh, there's another person coming in.
Oh, it's Jacob.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to go send an email real quickly. So I'll be back in just a second.
Okay.
Just like,
Hey, stop. That's creepy. Hey. You like my new hat? I made another one yesterday. I don't think that one will fit you. That one's smaller than the one I'm wearing.
how's it look on me? Looks like you're wearing
I like
purple.
girls' hats.
Hmm.
They
Probably
look
work.
just
I didn't know
fine.
the coats had a dog.
Dude, you just missed some of it.
All right. Oh, there's William. Where's the camera on this one?
Right there. I figured that out last night.
Were you doing higher grip on that?
Uh-huh. I was in the same spot too.
Elizabeth just
What? They always put the host in the middle, the top middle.
So you did it in here?
Yeah, we were doing Zoom. Well, I didn't do it
Last
in this
night with your
room. I
group?
sat on Daddy's bed.
Last night, Chad was here and I was there. Whenever I did gallery view.
Okay. I was just sending a quick email just in case there's some other people confused about changing the class time.
looks like the Harrisons just said they're having computer trouble.
Okay.
I don't know where William is, but I texted him. He's
Okay. All right, good.
Oh, it's Titus.
And there's no chat box.
There isn't?
Not
Yeah.
on here. We had one for my huddle group last night, so. Oh, Titus says there is.
Okay.
I can't see it here though.
Well,
Oh.
uh,
You have to click the more button and then it'll say chat.
yeah.
There's a chat thing.
Who is Lily Reed?
That's Mrs. That's her daughter.
Oh, okay. That's who you are. But
That's
your
my
name.
general science kid.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean physical. I mean physical.
Yeah, I was thinking that's not your name.
No,
Okay.
it's my offspring.
All right. Yeah, I haven't met that one.
She's all right. We'll keep her.
I bet she is.
I got one right here.
Hello.
Sophie.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm muting myself again. Bye, guys. Hey, Harrison girls.
Why is it up there?
Yeah.
Okay. There you are.
We figured it out. My computer was leaking out a few minutes ago.
Okay. So I think we're all around us, all here somewhere. Reactions.
Oh. I need to like
Okay. I guess let's go ahead and start with prayer. Father, we thank you for your amazing love, for your amazing care, and that even in times of trouble, you are there and you are with us and you are our strong support. We pray that you would give us wisdom and strength as we go through these times of trouble in our country. We pray for our president, vice president, and members of Congress, that they would be wise and caring about the right things during this time, that they might help our country through this time of crisis. Pray for those who have lost jobs, and that you would supply their needs, and for those that are sick, that you would bring healing. We thank you for your great love for us. Help us, please, as we tackle this topic, that we might understand it well. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. So, anybody have any questions or anything before we jump in? Everybody's doing well? Everybody's good and healthy?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, that's good to know. What do we need to talk about? Your labs will be due next week. We'll pretend that we're doing it, or that you're doing it today sometime. And that will be due with next week's homework. So you always have an entire week to do your lab, just like before, even though we're not doing the lab in class. The topic for today is the respiratory system. And as you have probably noticed, if you did some of your reading, which I hope you did, you're supposed to, it's not exactly an easy topic. And I do have some things I will be sending you out next week that's going to help in the study of cellular respiration, which is going to be one of the focuses of our next lesson. And I know you had that in biology and you thought, this is really hard. Well, it's about to get a little bit worse. And we're still just at surface level. If you take biology in college, you're going to get this in a lot more depth, and you'll see how complicated it is. But I want us to really begin to understand that reaction, the cellular respiration reaction, and what's happening in there, and to gain some depth in this. So I want us focusing on that a lot, and I've got a chart that I'm going to send out to you that I think will help. So let's go ahead and check over your quizzes for today, your quiz 14.1. So if you want to find that. Okay. So let's look at question 1. Another term for the false vocal cords is the what?
Vestibular folds.
Right. That's answer A. Okay, number 2. The trachea divides into 2 primary bronchi, which continue to branch off into smaller tubes until they open into the
Alveoli.
right. That's B. All right, 3. The left side of the lung has 3 lobes, while the right side has only 2.
False.
False. How would you make that true?
You switch them.
Yeah, we got that backwards. The left side 2 lobes, right side 3. Okay, 4, which is not, which of the following is not a function of the respiratory system?
Mastication.
Mastication, right. That's answer C. Number 5, the ability to use our voices to make the sounds necessary for speech is known as
Articulation.
Articulation. B.
articulation, right. So I imagine Asher and William and Olson know a good bit about that, because that's one thing. When you are saying your lines for a play, you have to articulate clearly so people understand you. Yeah. Number 6, the muscles of principal respiration include the diaphragm and the include the diaphragm and the what?
External intercostals.
Right. Answer D. All right, the matching section now. The part of the respiratory system containing the nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, and the pharynx.
Upper respiratory tract.
Okay, answer H. Upper respiratory tract.
We don't have an answer H.
You
Not
know?
in
I do.
Oh.
I got it.
I
Oh.
do. I have that.
that can be seen. So I didn't know what to put. I just left it blank.
Oh, okay.
I knew the answer to 3, so I wrote it down. But
Huh.
1 and 8, I didn't know what to put.
So how many questions do you have on in that matching section?
8.
8.
Huh, I wonder how that got left off. That's weird. I'll have to be sure it gets put on there. So the answer is H. Anyway, it's upper respiratory tract. All right, number 2, the ease with which the lungs inflate.
A.
A.
Compliance. The process of O2 and CO2 exchange between the alveoli and the blood.
External respiration.
Respiration.
Right. F. So we've got HAF so far. And then question 4, a molecule with a hydrophobic end and a hydrophilic end.
Surfactant.
Surfactant.
Yeah.
That also sounds sort of like a phospholipid, doesn't it? Okay. So answer's B. Number 5, the process of getting air into the lungs and getting it back out.
Ventilation.
Right? Ventilation. That's E.
We
Then
don't-
the process of O2 and CO2 exchange between the cells and the blood.
That's D.
Okay, D, internal respiration. And then the part of the respiratory system containing the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs is,
Lower respiratory tract.
right, G. All right, number 8, air in the pleural cavity, which leads to a collapsed lung.
I don't know how to say that.
C.
C, okay, pneumothorax. All right, the extra credit. What are 2 processes beside the action of the muscles that aid in expiration?
Elasticity in the lungs and the surface tension of alveolar fluid.
Yeah,
Right.
I got that too.
Oh, there's William. What are the 2 processes besides the action of the muscles that aid inspiration?
Negative pressure in the pleural cavity and presence of surfactant in the alveolar fluid.
Okay. So you have to have the negative pressure, pleural cavity, and surfactant. in the alveolar fluid. Okay. All right, good. So if you want to send me again the number you got right and then the number of extra credit that you got right, and I will send you back your quiz grade.
I got
Did
no
we
extra.
ever do that?
Okay.
I don't remember.
All right. So I think I'm going to, let's see. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, exit full screen. And then I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint. So if something crazy happens, I'll be back in a second. Ah, that worked. There it is. I got to put share screen on here. Share screen. And I got to go to here. All right. Is that coming up?
Not yet.
All right, let me try this again. There it is. I see it on there now. Okay. Now, I don't know what that is. I don't think I want that. All right, are you seeing it now?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let me go to a slideshow and go for a play from start. Okay, everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. All right. Okay. We keep having little music on there. Okay, so we're studying the respiratory system, and this, I think, is probably one of our most difficult modules because there's a lot of technical detail in this one. So you'll have to dig in a little bit. All right, so let's push the button. The respiratory system has two main divisions, two ways that we can break it up. One would be the upper respiratory tract, which includes your nasal cavity, the paranasal sinuses, and the pharynx. And this one is the one that you go to the doctor for when you have a really bad cold or really bad sinus infection. This is an upper respiratory tract infection is what that would be. And so that's just sore throats, that sort of thing are involved, are the upper respiratory tract. Then lower respiratory tract includes the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles and alveoli and the lungs. So you could get, if you have laryngitis or bronchitis or pneumonia, and you have a lower respiratory tract infection. And laryngitis isn't usually too serious, but bronchitis and pneumonia can be really pretty bad. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like. My goodness, that guy has sharp teeth. Okay, up at the top here in this area, you're seeing these are the sinuses, and these are just little spaces in your skull. that are there partly for just to keep your skull lighter weight so it's not quite so heavy, and also for resonance and voice. So if we didn't have sinuses, our voices would all be kind of flat. We'd maybe sound like we all had a computer type sounding voice. So, and these things are connected to our nose, and they can get infected and give us headaches and that sort of thing, especially sensitive to allergies, it seems like. Okay, and then going down, you see here's the nose area, or the nasal area, and then this is the beginning of the throat area. All this going down in here are the pharyngeal area. This is the, right here you see the opening for the pharyngotympanic tube, and you have a tube that opens, well, there's a membrane there covering it, but it's from the ears that kind of opens out in here, and that is for the equalization of pressure in the ears with the atmosphere. So if you've ever been in an airplane or up on a mountain, you've noticed your ears popping, and that's because of this little tube here that equalizes the pressure. Sometimes those are called eustachian tubes. Here's the nasopharynx area right in here. You see this is connected. Here's your nose, and here's your pharynx area. Then the uvula is this thing hanging down here, the hanging down thing in the back of your throat, which also helps close off the esophagus or epiglottis. I'm sorry, when you're trying to swallow. And here are some tonsils, palatine tonsils. Then the oropharynx, and this is the part of the throat that's close to the mouth. The laryngopharynx means we're getting close to the voice box here. And you see there the vestibular fold, vocal fold. This tube is the esophagus. Here's the thyroid cartilage of the larynx. Okay. Now, that's the upper respiratory tract that we were looking at a little bit there. This is more the lower. Here's the larynx. And this is that cartilage again that we were talking about. And here is the trachea. And notice it's going to split and divide into two bronchi here. Then those bronchi, as they get into the lungs, are going to be splitting up a whole lot into lots of different branches. There's a secondary bronchus, a tertiary bronchus, and then down into the little bitty bronchioles, and then the terminal bronchiole, which is going to end in an alveoli. And these are spread all over the lungs. The bronchioles, so that they connect with the alveoli so that you can get air or oxygen. Okay, here's another diagram of kind of the same thing of the whole system there. This would be the upper area, and then from here down is the lower area. Notice in here that you see the lobes of the lung, the superior lobe and then the inferior lobe, the two lobes here. Here we have a superior lobe, and then a middle lobe, and then the inferior lobe, the three lobes on the right side. This is the diaphragm. That's also important in helping you breathe. Okay, so now let's just quickly review the functions. We're going to go over these in more detail, but we're going to just do an overview of these right now. The functions of the respiratory system, and this is the respiratory system and its parts kind of as a whole. There are some more functions of the specific parts within the respiratory system, but this is the system functions that we're looking at here. One is olfaction, which is the ability to what?
Smell.
Smell. Okay, second is voice. The third is ventilation. Ventilation is merely just getting air in, getting air out. And then respiration is the more complex process of getting oxygen from the lungs throughout the body. Okay, so let's look at some of these individual parts and their functions. The important function of the nasal cavity is, in terms of the respiratory system, is to condition the air. The secondary function is olfaction or smelling. Okay, but the nasal cavity has blood vessels that are very close to the surface, lots of them, and they warm the air as we breathe in, and they also moisten the air because of all the mucus that is around, and the mucus glands that are around in the nasal cavity. So the air as it comes into the lungs is going to be slightly warm, slightly moist. And as we bring that into our lungs, as we bring the air into our lungs, that's a really important, because it does help our lungs to be, it kind of protects them, because our lungs are very, very delicate. The alveoli tissue is very, very delicate. And so if we have air that's been conditioned, it's better for our lungs. So that's why we breathe through our noses as much as possible. Okay, then the larynx, it contains the vocal folds or the vocal cords to produce sound. Our language is affected by many parts: our tongue, our teeth, and so forth. So and that enables us to be able to articulate the sound. Okay. So the vocal cords themselves are mucosa covered ligaments in the upper portion of the larynx. There's the true vocal cords are also called the vocal folds, and these form a tight seal over the trachea during deglutition, and they also produce sound. And around those vocal cords, there's a lot of very delicate muscles that can precisely control our voices, so that if we want to talk in a very high voice we can, or a very low voice we can, and everything in between. It also affects the quality of our voices. We can make our voices soft or loud and all of these kinds of things by these tiny, tiny little muscles there around our vocal folds. Then we have the false vocal cords, which are the vestibular folds, and they sort of look like vocal cords, but they're not. They don't have any ability to make sound. And they're superior to the true vocal cords, and their purpose is to also help close the larynx during deglutition. So when we swallow, we want to be sure we're not getting stuff going down into our airways. And so we have the vocal cords, vocal folds that close over, and the vestibular folds that also close over to, is just an extra way of sealing off our airways. Okay, so yeah, these pictures leave a lot to be desired, but you can kind of get the idea. Here's the vestibular fold just above the vocal fold. And the vocal folds have the ability to vibrate as air passes over them, and that is the way that the sound is produced. Okay, so here's some others. Quiet respiration, that's sort of what it would look like. Forced inspiration, it's going to be widened. The area is going to be widened. All right. All right, let's look a little bit at the physiology of voice. How does that work? So air has got to pass through the glottis, causing the cords to vibrate. Okay, so the thing that produces sound is vibration. Okay, the volume is controlled by how forcefully the air passes through. So if you're going to sing a very, very loud note, you're going to take a really deep breath and then sing loudly. Okay, if you're quietly singing, quietly talking, then it's more just normal breathing type thing. You don't have to take that deep breath to get a lot of air through there. The pitch is controlled by the frequency of the vibrations, and this is done by the way the muscles can vary the thickness and the tension of the cords. Then there's another quality to our sound that is produced by the air resonating within air chambers, and that's called, of course, resonance. And we have the chest cavity, the pharynx, the paranasal sinuses. All of these are areas where the sound resonates. In a regular guitar, an acoustic guitar, you know, that hole that's behind the strings, that's the purpose of that hole behind the strings, is for the sound to be more resonant. If you didn't have that hole, it would sound like, well, if you've ever heard an electric guitar without the amplifier on, where you've just got that straight, the strings across that straight, whatever it's called, they're not going to have that same type of sound. It's not going to resonate and vibrate and keep going. Then articulation, the tongues, lips, teeth, larynx, palate, pharynx, all involved in the way that we articulate our words so that people can understand us. All right. Let's look now at ventilation and the structures that are involved in ventilation. Now remember, the ventilation is just a very simple getting air in and out of the lungs. And the first thing that we need to look at, the first structure, is the trachea. And the trachea runs down the front part of your throat. You can feel all of those little humpy things are those C-shaped rings of cartilage that are going down there for your airway. And there's 20 of them. And they're held in shape by dense connective tissue and smooth muscle tissue. The trachea branches into two bronchi. There's the right primary bronchus, which is going to be short and wide going to the right lung, and then the left primary bronchus, which is slightly longer and narrower, that's going to the left lung. And then the lungs themselves, the right has the 3 lobes, the left the 2 lobes. The bronchi are going to continue to divide to secondary and tertiary bronchi, then into bronchioles, and then terminal bronchioles, and finally the alveolar duct and the alveoli.
Why are there different lobes on each lung? What's the point?
You mean, why does the left have 2 and the right 3? I mean, because of the heart. So there's not room. There's not room in there in the left lung for the 3 lobes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Now, the next thing we'll look at is respiration. We're on our 4th function here of the lungs. And respiration is going to have 3 steps to it. Later, we're going to be looking at cellular respiration, which is going to have 4 stages. So don't get these mixed up. If you're asked for the steps of respiration, that's what these are. The stages of cellular respiration are going to be something entirely different. Okay, so the first step in the process of respiration, and respiration, remember, is getting oxygen into the cells themselves. Okay, so the first step of that is going to be the external respiration, and this is going to occur in the lungs. And it occurs at the level of the alveoli and the capillaries, and that's where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is going to happen. So the blood is going to pick up oxygen from the alveoli and then return carbon dioxide to the alveoli so that the carbon dioxide can be breathed out and we get it out of our bodies. So that's the first step, is this exchange. Then the second step is gas transport, where we have the oxygen being carried in the blood vessels to the cells. And then once it's there in the cells, it's going to pick up the leftover carbon dioxide from the cells and carry it back to the lungs. Now, the carbon dioxide comes about as a byproduct of cellular respiration. So cells go through cellular respiration to produce ATP, which is one thing that they're doing continually, so they have the energy that they need to do the processes that they need to do. But the byproduct of that is carbon dioxide, and that has to be eliminated. And so this is picked back up by the blood, carried back to the lungs so that it can be breathed back out. And then step 3 is internal respiration, and that occurs throughout the body, where the oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged between the cells and the blood. So we're starting at the alveoli and blood, then we're looking at the blood carrying or transporting these gases, and then finally the exchange between cells and blood. Okay, does everybody understand this process and what's happening here? Okay. All right, there's another picture of lungs and all the dividing. You can see in this one how they divide up, start with this one thing and then go to 2 and then divide up. It looks like tree branches in there till finally we get down to these little bitty alveoli. Okay, And these are very, very delicate. They're simple squamous epithelial tissue, very, very delicate little sacs here. And they're very thin. So as we breathe in oxygen, it eventually ends up down in one of these little bitty sacs in here. Okay, this number refers to the air pressure, and we'll look at that in next week's lesson a little bit more. And this is where the oxygen is going to hang out until it's, or carbon dioxide also, until it is ready to go into the cell or into the bloodstream. Notice here's the surfactant coating the alveoli. And each one of these little sacs are going to contain, are going to be ready to receive oxygen or transport carbon dioxide, whatever it needs to be done. So that's really the thing that does the work of the lungs, that little bitty sac. And notice lots and lots of blood vessels around the little capillaries, run very close to the alveoli, so that the blood or the gas exchange can be very quickly and effectively done. Also in the alveolar fluid and in the alveoli, that we have the macrophages there ready to gobble up any bacteria that might have been breathed in. Okay, now this is a diagram of the alveoli. There you see carbon dioxide and oxygen in there. And you see this small little gap. The capillary is very, very narrow here, and they're going to be, the oxygen is going to be flowing in here into the red blood cells. Actually, this capillary is almost drawn a little bit big because the blood cells themselves, the capillary is so narrow that the blood cells have to go through single file. And if you know how tiny your blood cells are, and so the capillary is just barely wide enough for those things to squeeze through. And that's for a reason, because that pushes the red blood cell right next to the capillary wall, so that it's right there ready to receive the oxygen that diffuses across these membranes. And then the carbon dioxide will be leaving from these blue cells, have lots of carbon dioxide in them, and they're leaving. The red cells have oxygen in them. They're not really red and blue in your body, but that's just drawn so that you can see what's happening. Okay, so is that where I'm supposed to be? Yeah, okay. So let's look at the muscles involved in ventilation. Now, principal inspiration means just breathing at rest, as you're just sitting there breathing right now. It's principal inspiration. And your diaphragm is going to contract and shorten and pull downward and push down on the abdominal organs to expand the size of the thoracic cavity. So what we want is our thoracic cavity to expand a little bit so that air is ready to come in. The other muscle involved is the external intercostals, and these are going to contract and pull the ribs up and out. And this also increases the size of the thoracic cavity. Okay. Now, if you want to do a forced inspiration, that means a deep, deep breath that you're thinking about, then that's going to involve your sternocleidomastoid muscles, the scalene muscles, and the pectoralis minor. All of these muscles are pulling apart the rib cage a little bit more so that it expands the size of the thoracic cavity. Muscles of forced expiration, when you're really trying to blow all of the air out that you can, that your abdominal muscles, the internal intercostals, which are going to be pulling the ribs together, and the abdominal muscles, again, pushing up to decrease the size of the thoracic cavity so you can push all that air out. Now, if you're just breathing quietly, normally, and you're not trying to force extra air out, then the exhalation is going to occur anyway, just when your diaphragm and the external intercostals relax. So that's going to, of course, shrink the size of the thoracic cavity, and the air is going to go out. And all of this is according to works according to the principles of Boyle's law, which is, anybody know?
Has to do with pressure.
Yeah, it has to do with pressure.
Isn't it that, like, I'm trying to remember exactly what it's like, and I can't find it in my book, but if there's a certain amount of pressure in one container, it tries to balance out the pressure outside the container?
Right, it's the principle of things wanting to even out. So if you've got an area that's got a lot of, now Boyle's law refers to the action of gases. So if you got an area that's very, very tightly packed with gases and another area that doesn't have much, that's going to flow from the area of high pressure to the area of low pressure. Okay. And so when we have a lot of air, or when we have a lot of room in our thoracic cavity, then we've got the outside pressure of the environment, air, and the inside pressure is going to be lower because there's more room in there, and so that's going to cause the air to come in. And then when we've got our lungs really full, the pressure inside our lungs is really tight, then when we relax that, it's just naturally going to flow back out to even out the pressure. Probably Mr. Sears could explain that a whole lot better because he's more of a physics person than I am, and that is that's a chemical things that something you'll talk about in chemistry as well as physics. Okay, now there are things that help us be able to breathe, things that aid ventilation. And one thing, or a couple of things that are going to aid expiration are the elasticity of the lungs and the surface tension of the alveolar fluid. So our lungs have a little bit of elasticity to them, so that when they're stretched out, they're naturally going to want to come back. Okay, so they're stretchy a little bit, or elastic, I guess we should say. And then the surface tension of the alveolar fluid, there's alveolar fluid all around the alveoli, and it's mostly water, and there's a lot of attraction between those water molecules, and so when they're stretched apart, they're naturally going to want to come back together. So that aids in expiration, aids in shrinking down the lungs so that the air comes rushing out. And then there's some processes that aid inspiration. and one has to do with the structure of the pleural cavity. There are 2 layers of membranes around our lungs, and one of these attaches to the outside wall of the lungs, and the other is going to attach more to the lungs, and in between those 2 membranes there is an opening called the pleural cavity. And because these things are sealed, it creates a suction effect and keeps the lungs slightly open at all times. So if something punctures that cavity and the air that is around that that is in the pleural cavity leaks out, it can cause your lung to collapse. What they mean by collapsed lung is just that your lung goes completely flat. There's no air left in it. That's also called a pneumothorax. So what do you imagine could happen to puncture or cause that pleural cavity to be broken open?
Getting shot.
No, probably not. That's one of the dangers of a broken rib, because the rib itself can puncture this lining, the pleural cavity, or puncture or get through into the pleural cavity. And of course, it's usually some sort of injury, car accident, or some sort of thing like that that causes the ribs to be, severely broken. The good thing is that each one of our lungs is wrapped in these membranes. Each one has their own pleural cavity. So if one lung collapses, the other one can still function. And eventually that hole will heal up and the air will get back in the pleural cavity, and the collapsed lung will recover. But we have both of them are sealed separately, so that if both of them go down, you have to have injuries on both sides, and that's pretty unlikely to happen. If that happens, you're probably in trouble in more than one area there. The other thing that aids inspiration is surfactant, because the surfactant reduces the surface tension, and so that it's not quite such a struggle. I mean, the surface tension is still there, but it's just slightly reduced, so that the lungs can fill up more easily. Okay, so here's a diagram where you can see these the pleural cavity, which is this area here. This is the lungs. Here's the pleural cavity right here. And there's this membrane here called the visceral membrane right in here. This is the visceral membrane, and the I think it's parietal membrane, pleural parietal membrane here. And this is the area in between. And these are, it doesn't show real well, but these are independently sealed. So here's some of the forces acting on the chest. The elastic, which is elasticity, which is compliance, and then the non-elasticity, which is resistive. So there is a certain amount of airway resistance for air to come in, just because of the way things work, that you have a natural type of resistance. Now, if you have problems like asthma, that can become a lot more serious problem, because that causes the bronchioles to swell up, and you have a lot tinier area for a lot smaller tube for the area to try to get through, for the air to try to get through. All right, so let's look in more detail now at external respiration. External respiration is very, very efficient. So most of the time, as the blood leaves the lungs, it's virtually 100% oxygenated. So any of you ever had those little clips put on your fingers where they tested your oxygen levels? So they usually pretty high, like what, 97, 98% on there. So that is a measurement of the external respiration, because as your blood leaves the lungs, it's 100% oxygenated. And there's several factors that lead to this efficiency. So it's a very efficiently designed system. One is that the respiratory membrane is very, very thin. And there's also a large surface area. I think our dogs are talking. It's okay, Riley. Okay, so there's a large surface area. All of those little bitty sacs in the lungs, all the little bitty alveoli, and all the little capillaries, all of that, if we were to spread that, all of that respiratory membrane area out, I think it said it was a 35 by 25, and it fit a 35 to 25 foot room. That's huge amount of area there for the oxygen exchange to occur in. Also, the narrowness of the capillaries in the lung, the red blood cells have to go in single file. And then the shape of the red blood cells also increases its surface area and making it easier to take in the oxygen molecules. And then there's this controlled relationship between ventilation and blood flow. So an increase in heart rate leads to an increase in ventilation. So if your heart is beating faster, you're going to breathe faster so that you have more oxygen available. And then the functional residual capacity is another very important factor, because there's always some air remaining in the lungs. No matter how hard you try, you can't breathe it all out. There's always going to be a little bit there. Okay, so this is showing you a little bit more in detail about the respiratory membrane. The respiratory membrane includes the lining of the alveoli and the lining of the capillary and the little space in between the two. Okay, so this very thin area here where we're going to be passing oxygen and carbon dioxide back and forth. Very, very thin tissues, and that's the respiratory membrane. Okay, here are some important terms for you to know as we're talking about all of this stuff. Tidal volume. And when we're talking about tidal volume, that just refers to normal quiet breathing, that what the amount of air that's in your lungs as you're just quietly breathing. Then the functional residual capacity is talking about how much air is left in the lungs, I believe, after the forceful exhalation. Total lung capacity is how much you can get in your lungs taking the deepest breath that you can possibly take. And then residual volume is what's left after just a normal exhalation. I think I have those right. So be familiar with those terms. Okay. So, whoops, what did I do? End show. All right. So, okay. Now we're all on a little bitty screen, I guess. What did I do? I wonder. Oh, well. I guess, can you guys still see me?
Yeah.
Am I just little bitty? I guess that'll work. Okay. Let's take a look at your lab. So you know what you're supposed to do about that? Let's see. Wonder if I manage participants. No, that's not what I need to do. All right. Oh well. Let's see. Where is that? Okay, I think I got the force functional residual capacity and the residual volume backwards. Residual volume is what's left after forceful expiration, and functional residual is what's left after normal expiration. Okay. Right, let's close that. Okay. All right, so what you're going to need to do is go online and take a look at the images for a lung slide, human lung slide, and see if you can find the alveoli and the capillary and the respiratory membrane in there. That's what you're looking for. And they give you some pretty good details of what to look for in that in the book. We've actually looked at lung tissue before, I think back in module 2 or something when we were studying histology of tissues. So, and you can do your the drawings and all required from what you can find online. Have you been able to find slides pretty easily online?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody have questions or comments?
I'll turn in my homework after class. I haven't done it yet.
Okay. All right. So we have a different kind of due date or due time because of all of this. So
I just wanted to turn homework in too.
did everyone receive your tests?
Yes.
Ours are on the way.
Okay.
Yesterday.
Same.
Okay, all right.
We'll have ours sent out by tomorrow. It might have came with the mail a little bit ago,
It might have
or it might have gone away with the
gone
mail.
out this morning.
Yeah,
We took them yesterday.
okay, yeah. I had one that was mailed on Sunday and didn't get here till Wednesday, so sometimes the mail's a little bit slow, even though we're just real close to each other. Okay, I will send you information, a chart on cellular respiration that should help you in your studies. And we'll spend a good bit of our time next week talking about that. The other question was, would you guys prefer the 10 o'clock time or a 2 o'clock time for class? Which would work better for you guys?
2 o'clock in the morning?
Huh?
2
Yeah,
o'clock in the morning?
10
No,
for sure.
2 o'clock in the afternoon.
10 works for me because a lot of times I work Thursday afternoons.
Okay,
It's
10 works for us too.
two is less likely to work for us.
okay. All right, well, that's what I needed to know. So, of course, things come up where you have to miss class. You can go to the YouTube channel and see it all online, which should be interesting. Okay. So, anybody have any other questions or comments? Okay. I'm not always able to get, I try to get your work graded and to you, but I will do that as soon as I can. I kind of try to wait till everything comes in so that I can grade it together. So, well, you guys have a good weekend and keep washing your hands.
We should. We saw a thing about that on Facebook last night about how it's proteins and RNA held together with grease, and water dissolves the grease and kills the coronavirus bacteria.
No.
Yeah.
Soap does. Soap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Soap does it too.
Yeah, because soap breaks down the plasma membrane.
Yep.
Yep, so that's what happens. And so we want to break down those plasma membranes for sure, of those kinds of things. All right, so you guys have a good weekend and we'll talk to you next week sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
You.
Bye.
bye.
Yeah. No, don't leave meeting. No. Wait for the meeting to cancel.
We can wait.
End meeting. End meeting for all.